Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So welcome to everyone. Saturday evening reflection here at Abhayagiri. Just seem to have a momentary break in the strong winds and rain that we've been having throughout the day. Things have just settled down here for a moment. And just enjoying the contrast of all of that wild activity of the weather and then this moment of cessation, the peace of stillness. Just as I was getting my cup of tea before at tea time, talking briefly with Tan Rakito and just saying, getting my mind around giving a reflection this evening, and sometimes it's just so tempting to keep it extraordinarily brief and simple. It's like, okay, just ground yourself in the body. Let there be space in the mind. Notice the rhythm of the breathing. That's enough. But people have come from a long distance for a Saturday night, so maybe just aside from the basic essentials that I just mentioned, which is, I think, probably sufficient, but maybe just to have something to reflect on. I think what has mostly come to mind is just something that came up from this trip along with this trip that I just got back from with Luang Por Pasano. We went to England for Amaravati's Katina a few weeks ago, left, and then have been away for nearly 3 weeks, visiting several of the monasteries in England, and also a bit of a side trip to the monastery in Italy, which I'd never been to before. All good stuff. Good to connect with people and see how things are going at the other monasteries, which seems to be going well. But there's also all the plane rides, and have to admit to on the long ride from San Francisco to London, 11-hour flight, ended up watching a couple of movies. Wholesome movies, of course. But one of them was a movie of a book that I had read about 3 years ago. It actually brought up a lot of food for thought for me at that time, and I actually had some reflections around it at our Thanksgiving retreat 3 years ago, pertinent and timely. But it was a story that was made into a movie, a book entitled, and the movie is the same title, called The Best of Enemies. Maybe some of you have seen it or read it as well. But it was a very moving story that had a special significance for me. And some of you have heard some of my reflections on it already, so this may be a bit of a repeat. But it was very pertinent because it took place in the early 70s in Durham, North Carolina, which is the town where I was born and grew up. And it was a story that was set around the occurrence of court-ordered school desegregation. The Supreme Court of the United States had ordered the South, well, everywhere, where there was any kind of segregated school systems, segregated by race, of course, that's not a legal, enforceable kind of a thing, and the schools, particularly in the South, were ordered to desegregate, and that had been in the 60s. The order come through in North Carolina had been particularly resistant to following through on that, but it was finally coming to a head in the early 70s, and they were essentially being told, you gotta comply with this law. It's been too long that you've been putting it off, and that was happening in North Carolina, and particularly in the Durham school district, just as I was coming into high school, and so. Eventually, of course, what happened was the schools integrated, and as I entered the 10th grade, there were two high schools in Durham at that time. One was in essentially predominantly the white section of town, and one was in the predominantly black section of town. And I was living in, of course, one of the white sections, quite a segregated city in the South, and was bused to the school that was formerly all black, Hillside High School. And that was the beginning of my 10th grade, and did that through high school. So I was kind of right there in the midst of all of that and participating in that, and watching all of this unfold in the Durham City's school system. But prior to the actual integration of that year, as I entered the 10th grade, the year before that, there was a realization that this had to happen, and things were moving in that direction, and some far-sighted people in the school system thought that it would be very useful, very important to see if there was a way to prepare the community such that maybe there was a way to avoid any kind of intense conflict or violence that had happened in other school districts throughout the South as the schools were integrated. And so these people arranged for and set up a group of, or a series of hearings, if you will, or seminars, if you will, to help prepare the community. The word that they used, and I'm not quite sure of its origin, is called a charrette. But they brought in a very skilled facilitator to help organize this, to see if there was a way to help diffuse the tension as the schools were preparing to integrate. And kind of parallel to all of this happening were the lives of two people that were kind of part of this, that eventually ended up being part of this story. And one of the people that was, whose lives were plugging along in Durham was a woman whose name was Ann Atwater. She was a black activist in her community and was very strong advocate for improving the life and the lot of many of the very economically disadvantaged, segregated black population, with trying to improve housing, some very poor, deteriorated housing conditions owned by landowners who weren't interested in helping to keep the facilities in good shape, and all the difficulties of poverty and disadvantage. And she was an activist, very strong activist in that community, very outspoken. And then kind of along a parallel path, a white man who had grown up also quite disadvantaged, very low income, but in the poorer white section of town. And through just a series of life events and his own conditioning as being quite disadvantaged in his own way, he, having grown up in a very conservative, blue-collar kind of environment, and having made his way into being the owner of a gas station, trying to eke out a livelihood and support his family, and looking for a sense of belonging and identity himself, he ended up getting involved with the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, in the South, and finding himself buoyed up with the recognition of being a member of a community that gave him some sort of sense of purpose and being, albeit in a, like what many of us would consider to be not a very skillful way, based on racial segregation and prejudice and protectionism. But he became appointed over a period of time to be the head of the local chapter of the KKK. Name was C.P. Ellis. So these parallel lives were going on with their own thing as the schools were becoming integrated. And the idea of the facilitator that was brought in was to see if he could try and bring these communities together in a way such that there could be a bit more understanding and avoiding any out-and-out violence, conflict with the integration of the schools. And so these seminars were organized for over I don't know how long a period of time, week, 2 weeks, to come together. And what was decided was that he needed facilitators for this, these charrettes as they were called. And over some series of consultations and discussions, they thought they would be bold and try and invite both Ann Atwater and C.P. Ellis to be co-facilitators, people who were clearly, if for want of a better word, enemies of each other, very strong feelings, and thought that if this could happen, if they would agree to this, this might end up being something that could be potentially very potent, a potent way to bring people together. So just over a series of discussions, I think, there was a lot of resistance on both of their parts. And for those of you who saw the movie, just so you know, actually the movie was a fictionalized version of the book, and actually there were quite a few liberties taken, and a lot of what happened in the movie I don't think was reflected in the book, but all that notwithstanding, the basic story is still pretty much the same. But after a lot of, are you kidding? There's no way I'm going to go, and co-facilitate this kind of a thing with that person. on both sides. Eventually they both agreed to it, and I think, as it was brought up in the book, Mr. Ellis, C.P. Ellis, realized that this was going to be happening. The schools were going to be integrated, and he might well best represent his community if he actually participated rather than just withdrawing. So he agreed to it, she agreed to it, and they started out with this facilitator in these community hearings. All very contentious, very difficult, as they were trying to just open up the subject of, what's this going to be like? What can we do to make it work? And so there was a lot of storming and difficulty, disagreement, accusation, unpleasantness, anger, along all the lines you could possibly imagine in the opening days of this. And as things were going along and they were forced to actually be with each other more and more, side by side, things just over time, just by the nature of time and association, started to settle just a little bit, and things were, moving along a little bit more easily as the seminars rolled on. And there was an evening, apparently, if I remember correctly from the book anyway. There was one evening after a long, exhausting series of presentations and discussions where the evening was over, and the two of them were just left sitting by themselves after the evening had finished, and they were still in the meeting place. And maybe it was just through exhaustion or the timing, who knows. They just were talking with each other. And it became more personal, investigating each other's lives, talking about the challenges of being, growing up poor, trying to make ends meet, trying to put food on the table for their families, trying to just do the best they can to exist in difficult times on both their sides. And as the story goes, as particularly for C.P. Ellis, he started to hear, I think for the first time, of the struggles that the community that Anne was representing was going through, and kind of had his epiphany that their struggles in the Black community, and in particular her personal life, her family, wasn't any different than what he was experiencing in his family. It was just a realization that here were two people, regardless of the color of their skin, who were just trying to do the best they could to help their families, to provide a decent level of requisite support, and just a way to get through life. And that it wasn't any different from his. And it was at that moment that all of his structures, all of his ways of looking at the world, all of his views, particularly around racial issues, his position in the community with the KKK, started to crumble. And to make a very long story short, he just realized that the way he had been viewing the world, his life, and his community, he couldn't hold it together anymore. He couldn't do it. He couldn't live that paradigm anymore. He realized through his own honesty, self-review, that it didn't hold water. And apparently he, as the story goes, he just broke down. And things in its own way at that point started to fall apart for him. He realized that he'd been living living a lie in a sense, mostly a lie to himself. And the way the story unfolds is that they eventually worked through the seminars. Things were eased up a bit. They helped their communities get used to it. The schools, of course, integrated the next school year, which, again, I was part of. I was sort of on the periphery of knowing all of this was going on. I didn't really know all the details, but the result was, it had its bumpy areas, but it was a relatively uneventful integration of the school system largely through the efforts of these people. And the footnote of the story is that CP himself resigned from the KKK. He gave up his position, left it, and eventually worked his way into becoming an advocate for workers' rights in his community and also in the black community in terms of employment rights and upgrading the status of workers in the tobacco industry and in the I think particularly in the textile mills of Durham, to try and help bring a higher standard of living for people who were very underprivileged. Became quite an activist in that way with his change of heart. And both he and Anne became very, very fast friends, very, very close to each other, having gone through that together, and developed a very, very close relationship up until first his death, and then some years later she passed away. Actually, it was not that long ago that she passed away. But it was such a moving story and so meaningful to me, just because this was all happening at the time that I was in school there, and I didn't know the details of this. I knew something was kind of happening, but to know that through the book and then this movie that I saw on the plane, that this was events happening right in my life, was just very moving, and just really points to the power of no matter what we do in our lives, no matter how we've lived our lives, no matter the path we've gone down, it's never too late to realize if we're going down the wrong path, to be able to stop and reassess and go back and start over again if we have to, even if it means complete letting go of everything that we've believed in, bought into, and structured our whole existence around. It's never too late. I think we can see parallels in our own lives. This is a very dramatic example, but that sense of wanting to belong, wanting to have some sort of identity in the world is common to all of us. And we can just see how we structure our lives around looking for that kind of stability or belonging, inner security, in the way that we establish our identities throughout life. Again, not often quite so dramatic, is in that story, but all of us, in some way or another, have gone through periods of discomfort and of being unsure of our place in the world, where we fit in. Starting usually in our adolescence, when we're trying to establish a sense of who we are as an individual human being, and wanting to belong and fit into a peer group, establish some sort of sense of security within a group of friends, but not sure who we are either. You got that parallel course of wanting to belong, but also wanting to develop an self-identity. And that, in different ways, continues throughout our life as we look at ways to feel secure. So we pick up certain interests or skills that we are inclined towards. We establish maybe a vocation of some sort, or anywhere from the simplest ways of making a livelihood to the most more complicated or more developed, if you will, or more studied ways of developing a livelihood. Anywhere from being a janitor just to have money to pay the bills, or going to school for years and years and years and becoming a brain surgeon. We establish some sort of identity around livelihood, occupation. Do that in our relationships, looking for security, looking for identity, stability in a relationship. Maybe establishing ourselves in the role of a parent, if we decide to go that path, becoming a father or a mother, being a husband, a wife, establishing identity, looking for some sort of security within a social paradigm. We develop ideas and opinions and political viewpoints, social viewpoints, judgments about where we stand, taking sides in the world of politics and social structures, developing strong views, identities around that. All as a way of trying to help make some sense of the world, where we are in the world, our place in the world. And that's all well and good. I mean, it actually kind of has to happen that way if you want to have any kind of cohesive social structure, and we're social beings, and we're looking for ways to integrate ourselves into that. But the more we identify with it and take it on as who we are, then when change happens, and change is inevitable in all of these realms, change happens that challenges our sense of stability, so that we grow tired of what we're doing as an occupation, or we've experienced change in relationships. The person that you thought you'd be with forever, all of a sudden is seeing somebody else behind your back, and you didn't know about it, or the interest wanes on your part and you start looking around for another relationship, something that's more exciting. Or, in better situations, just through age and growing older, and the inevitable change with illness and death. Somebody dear passes away, and you no longer have that form of role, that identity, that place in the world as a partner. Political views change, the world changes, your leader who you supported and who won the election loses the next one, and then somebody else comes in that is somebody who you wouldn't want to be there, or vice versa. The world of change happens and challenges that stability, that sense of identity. The more we have clung to those and identify with those, when that inevitable change happens, the more painful it is for us. So as all of these changes happen in our lives and things come and go, roles change, identities change, that leads to either, the usual reaction, I think, is to pick up and try and form some sort of other identity, pick up another relationship, establish oneself again in a different way, or a different midlife crisis, the change of job, the change of spouse, buying the new race car, whatever it is that we need to do to kind of reestablish some sort of sense of well-being and identity. And that just keeps on going on and on and on in response to the change and the stress. Or maybe there is a deeper awakening and a deeper sense that maybe there's a different way to hold all of this. And that actually sometimes that change is an opportunity for a serious perestroika, a serious restructuring of our lives in such a way that we start to challenge this constant reinforcement of typical identification with roles, responsibilities, relationships, livelihoods, and start to seek something that's a little bit more stable, long-term, can be the impetus for turning towards more of a spiritual path, which I suspect many in this room have chosen to do as a response to the dukkha of life. And it's that willingness to actually look and say, okay, what I've been doing is painful, it's dukkha, it's unsatisfactory. It's time to restructure, it's time to see if there isn't a different way, seeing if there isn't some way that I can be in the world, that I can identify in the world, that leads to a longer term sense of contentment, stability, happiness, that isn't dependent on just all of these external identities that we can assume. These kinds of things also happen in, actually in spiritual practice, in monastic life. Even as we take up a spiritual practice, sometimes we get very tracked into certain methods of even like in our in the Buddhist tradition, methods of practice, particular teachers we become enamored with, and we move into a certain identity. I'm this kind of practitioner. I'm this kind of meditator. This is the tradition that I take refuge in. This is the teacher that is the best teacher, is the right teacher. And we sink a lot of faith in that. And that's often a very good place to start. We need to be careful, though, with that, because if we place all of our identity and belief in forming around a particular technique or a method or a teacher, and decide that is the way, the only way, then when we maybe have used that or have worked with that person or that method for a long time and have gotten what we can out of it, and it's not actually working for us so well anymore, then that can be a period of imbalance and difficulty as well. And seeing people, even monastics of more than 10 years, 15 years, in that situation where they've so strongly identified with a particular method or a particular teacher, and when it's not working anymore, huge amount of devastation occurs, and people that I know have even been so disenchanted, and not the good kind of disenchanted, that they've disrobed and left just out of bewilderment as to what happened. What happened. Others, might be able to be a little bit more flexible, but pick up another method, pick up another belief system, pick up another. That one didn't work, or that teacher wasn't right, so this one will be the one. Pick it up with the same fervor and intensity and identification and clinging, in a sense, to a particular method or person. And all of these kinds of structures can be useful, even in a spiritual sense, if we take them up and hold them with a clarity that says, this is a tool, this is not an end to itself. And the constant need to look inwards and to see what is really going on a deeper level, rather than on that external structural level, rather than placing absolute and ultimate belief and faith in a method or a person or an identity or some sort of system. We look deeper beyond the convention, deep into the heart, deep into what is going on a deep level inside the heart. Is what I'm doing, whether it's in the world, whether it's in a livelihood, whether it's in social relationship, whether it's in spiritual practice, particularly if it's in spiritual practice, how is this actually affecting the heart? What's happening inside? What's the truth? What's the truth inside? Getting beyond structure, getting beyond story, and down to really taking a close look inside, and being willing to ask ourselves the question, is this dukkha? Is this unsatisfactory? Being willing to see when things are not happening in a useful way, and being willing to evaluate and see for ourselves what is the actual effect inside, deep inside. And it's only when we do that, when we take that up as our basic point of practice, to really know, to really see deeply, rather than depending on ideas and concepts and structures. We use those, but we have to use them to point in to see what's really happening deep inside, and is it serving the purpose that we intended it to, that we hoped it would do? Is it having a result in terms of offering freedom and peace, contentment on a deep level? And that willingness to look in and to be really honest means sometimes we have to really experience some painful truths if things aren't working the way we thought. And to be with that and to learn from that and to own it. And to be willing to set aside that which is no longer fruitful, and to let something that's not working, let something that's not filling the bill anymore, letting that go, and opening ourselves up to, rather than just jumping into the next thing to become, the next identity to pick up, the next practice to attach to or cling to to allow ourselves to be in that space of don't know, to be in that space of instability, in a sense of not having a place to be born into, an identity to be born into, and to really open up to that moment of cessation of something that finally you've done enough with, and it's time to move on, but you don't know where that's going to take you. And to really just be able to be with that space of uncertainty and unclarity. And if something eventually starts to come up, to pick it up as one needs to, as a new paradigm, but to do so carefully with the sense of, well, we'll see how this works too. Hopefully it'll be something more skillful, something more useful. If you've been involved in a life situation or in a spiritual practice situation that hasn't been fruitful, to realize that this new attempt might be something that will work, it might be something that won't work, but to just be open to the effect that it's having, and to constantly be attentive to that deep level of what's happening in the heart, what's the truth right now, and to be open to change. Not that we don't want to commit ourselves to try something, a new paradigm, if we think it'll be effective, but to be open to that possibility that too will change over time, and to be able to adjust. So mostly, it's all just to say that, whatever we've done, wherever we are in our lives, in our practice, if we find ourselves having gone down the wrong path, then it's never too late to realize that, and to deeply look into ourselves, be willing to experience some suffering, some difficulty with this honest approach, and to say, okay, wrong path, wrong place, stop, turn around, go back, start over. It's never too late to do that. And we've got nothing but time and patience to develop in this practice, if nothing else, and in our lives. So, if C.P. Ellis can redeem himself through honest self-examination and willingness to open to the truth of what's happening, I think that's a lesson for all of us, that we can always begin again. So I'll just offer that for this evening's reflection.
Page 41.